Dr. Susan Johnson is Professor Emeritus of Obstetrics and Gynecology and Epidemiology at the University of Iowa, where she practiced and then served as Associate Dean and then Associate Provost of Faculty Affairs. I've known her as a long-standing interest in in time management and productivity, and she's given hundreds of wonderful presentations locally and around the country. She has a business thriving amidst chaos, which I think is very apt for today, and offers workshops and individual coaching. She has a website. I encourage you to go to it, www.thrivingamidstchaos.com. And it has some wonderful articles. I met her years ago and still go back to one of her articles, Basics of Organizing Your Work Time. And also, she said to me way back when, be relaxed and resilient. It's stuck with me. So I'm going to turn you over to Dr. Johnson. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Great. Thanks, Pacey. Thanks for inviting me. And thanks to Sarah for all the work setting this up. Um, oh, we have to share.
Yeah, we can't see your slides at the moment.
No, you can't. So
okay, we see him
are you
now.
ready? So Pacey's
Yep.
already talked about my website, so I say no more. I remind you now and later that if you have any questions whatsoever about this topic or this talk that you want to get input from me about, just email me. There's my Gmail address. This is being recorded, and you'll also get a copy of the slides. So hopefully you'll have enough to go on after. Here is our agenda. These are the topics: to-dos, project work, weekly and daily plans, and email management. Now, in this talk, I'm going to violate most of the fundamental rules of pedagogical lecture giving and PowerPoint presentation. I probably have too many slides, too much information, and too many words in some slides. Now, there's a reason why I do this, because I have one shot at you. And I don't know what you individually each need in this broad area of time management and productivity. And so my approach is to pick these topics, which I think are core in developing a system that's effective. And I don't want to just provide motivational, it's not just motivational speech that I'm going to be giving. I want you to be able to take each one of these, and if it's something you want to try, I'm going to give you enough information so that you can actually try it. And so that's my rationale for too much. Now, the first two topics are can be classified under a broader rubric of how to create an inventory of your work. I'll say more about that later. And then the second two are ideas about helping you get work done. Two specific methods that the first one is about planning, which allows you to not only do more things, but do them in the right priority order. And the email management is an example of how to have a process for routine work that can make that work go faster. And some of those principles you can apply to other routine work that you have in your jobs. Now, this is a really important point that I want to be sure you hear. Every one of you has been successful, and you've done it because you have a way to get things done already. But I'm going to guess that there are some areas where you might want to buff up the system that you have, or one that's a particularly troublesome to you, um, and you'd like to see if there's a different approach. And I've seen in my own career and in talking with lots of coaching clients that as you kind of move up the ladder from residency to fellowship, if you do one, to early career to later career, things that your workload expands and the complexity of it expands. And so systems that may have worked for you back when you were, in college probably might not cut it anymore. And so it's always worthwhile taking a look periodically to see if there's any way you could do things better. But the rule is if you are doing something that works, it works. It doesn't matter what I say. If it's working for you, don't make any changes. Okay, so here's the first topic, keeping better track of to-dos, and there's the objective that you would have received. So when I work with coaching clients, the first question I always ask, regardless of why they're consulting with me, is how they keep track of the work they have to do. And what I have discovered as having asked this questions now probably hundreds of times is the answer that I get is some variation of this. I keep some on sticky notes. I have a notebook where I write down certain things. I have a list on my desk. I have a note program on my phone, and I sometimes text myself. And then the final, if they don't say this, I always ask, and does this include everything? And then I find out, no, there's still a lot of stuff or some stuff that's not recorded anyplace. It's just kept in your head. Well, it turns out that this is probably the most common, and so I have a name. I finally decided I needed a name for it. So I call this the Here, There, Anywhere to-do management system. And this can work if you don't have much to do. When you start to have a lot to do, especially when it's across different kind of missions, it becomes really difficult to make this manage this. And in fact, having a system or non-system like this can lead to a lot of underlying stress that you may not even be aware that you have. And so
Interior Minister said
probably won't surprise you to hear.
Fight within 2 or 3 minutes after they were alerted to a break-in.
Somebody's got should mute. Somebody
Yeah,
has the
somebody,
radio on or something.
please mute your line. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I muted them.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay, great, great. So maybe it won't surprise you to hear that I'm going to recommend something sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is a consolidated system where everything has a place and there's a limited number of them. So this is going to be, we're going to call this the Only Here inventory of work system. So now I'm going to explain. So typically when I give this advice, someone will say, well, that sounds like a great idea, but how in the world am I supposed to do that? I've tried lots of different tools. None of them work. I don't like them. How do I get started with this? So let me talk more about the elements of this. And before I do that, let's just say that the goal for having an inventory of work is for the creation of one, what it should look like, is that in that system, all of your future planned work is recorded, and it gets in there as quickly as possible, with one exception, and that's anything you have to do immediately or could reasonably do immediately. If you have the time and the capacity, you're not interrupting something else and putting off important work. So people often wonder whether I mean you can't do anything right away, but of course, I don't mean that at all. So I'm going to give you some examples of things that of items that might be found on a typical to-do list, at least for the ones that I've seen in doing this work. Call the lab, write the book chapter, attend a faculty meeting at 2 o'clock on October 2025. Well, no one actually puts that on their list, but it's a kind of to-do. And maybe learn medical Spanish. So I'm guessing that you can see that these are not the same. These are not the same kind of work. Each of them represents a different kind of thing that you're wanting to do or thinking about doing. And so what I'm going to do now is introduce a set of operational definitions for these different types of work. And we'll use them throughout the slide or throughout the presentation. The reason I'm calling them operational definitions is because if you read much of the time management literature, which you don't have to ever, you'll find that these words get used, have all different kinds of definitions. And so I have to say, I'm going to say exactly what I mean by these words. So the four kinds of work are tasks, projects, scheduled events, and ideas for later. So a task we're going to define as work that could be done. I'm going to call it a daily unit of work. It's a small thing that you could do within a few minutes or maybe up to an hour or so. So a daily unit of work. A project is a bigger piece of work that has multiple tasks associated with it and will typically be completed over time, days, weeks, or sometimes a few months. So the two are related to each other, but they're quite different in a variety of ways. And then scheduled events. I'm saying this because I didn't want to forget to say that, of course, your calendar is part of your inventory of work. And of course, you don't put things like this on your to-do list, but they will go on your calendar. And I'll say a little bit more about that. And then the last one, it's really hard to show this item and in the sort of say what the power is or the problem is with having them sit on your list. I would say most people, if they were writing this on their own list, and this was the idea they had, they would just write down learn medical Spanish on their list. Even though they know they really haven't decided whether they're going to do it or not. It's an idea that they have about something they might want to do. And it turns out that that kind of item is just a disaster for any to-do list because it means that every time your brain reads an item, it has to ask itself, is this something that you're really going to do, or is this something you might do? And so you can't really focus and make good plans when you have your list littered with those things that you haven't really decided about. And so one of the best things that you can do with a to-do list is to take out those items and put them someplace else. And so let's talk about that first. And the idea is a simple one. Just find another place. It can be a separate list in the same tool you use. It could be in a different location. It doesn't really matter. The Ideas for Later serves a couple of purposes. It's a kind of a repository of things that you don't want to forget about that you might want to do, and you can just go there and read through them and then promote things into your real list at a time when you might want to take them up. But it's important to recognize this is something you might do, but you might not. This is not a bucket list. It's not the things you will do before whatever endpoint you want to think of. This is just a list of things you might do, and most of them you won't. So you get them out of your head so you're not thinking about them all the time. Get them over here. And then now you have a list that's left of things you're really going to do. And the list has more power, the real list. Now the calendar, I'm just going to say a little bit about the calendar, just some basics that you probably know most of this. But the first thing on the list is what some people call the golden rule of calendars, if you want, and that is that you need to have one calendar, a view of one calendar that shows all of your time commitments, Now, this is, as you probably all know, extraordinarily difficult because all of us deal with more than one calendar. I don't think I've talked to anybody recently who has just one calendar. Well, I do actually. So maybe I'm the only person I know who has just one calendar. Because I just put everything in my Outlook, regardless of, and I've always done that. But now, you work in different hospitals or clinical settings, and they have their own calendars, and they can't be integrated into well, you know the problem. And then there are family calendars. So there's no simple solution for this. So I want to say that if it's not possible to have calendars that can be overlaid, and now sometimes in your phone you can do that with most of them, but maybe not on your computer. You need to, during work hours especially, have blocked off any time on your main calendar that you're not available, even if you don't put much detail in it about what you're doing. So if you're in clinic at the VA all day on Monday, you're going to block the whole day off clinic at VA, and then you go to that calendar to find out the details of what you're going to be doing. So make sure that all of the time that you have unavailable to you is blocked. If you don't do that, double scheduling happens, as you probably know, but it also makes the calendar less useful in assessing how much sort of discretionary time do you have during the week to do things that you want to do, whether it's fun or work. If the empty space isn't accurate, you get an overinflated idea of how much time you really have. I recommend, if you're at your desk in particular, but also on your phone, if you now I'm making an assumption that most of you use Outlook for your main calendar, but if you don't, most of these principles all apply to Google Calendar as well. Oh, I've seen people who use the monthly view, and that's the only view they ever look at. And I think, what is what is going on here? Use either have the full week up or a day or a group of days so that you can see the time grid and see when free time is coming up and so on. So use either the daily or weekly time grid for just regular use. Every single scheduled event that you have should be included, even if it's something you do every week. I am sure all of you really do this, but I've talked to people who don't do it. They say, oh, well, I go there every week, so I don't have to write it out on the calendar. But you should do that, of course. And then the one thing that you may not be doing is putting in transition time when it's needed. So if you have to like go between this call and this meeting and they're in different locations, or you need to have some buffer time in order to recover or just to take a break, go ahead and put that right on the calendar. And here you see somebody has to leave early, a little bit early to pick up kids from daycare. Put that on the calendar so that, first of all, you'll know what you're supposed to be doing and you'll prevent or minimize overscheduling by other people. Okay, that's the basics of the calendar. Oh, you can also use that space up at the top, which is in using items that are classified as all day free, so they appear up there and don't block off any time. And you can use specific kinds of notes there to be helpful. So I use these three things pretty much exclusively. Any tasks that have to be done that day because there's a due date, the deadline is today. Um, General deadlines for when things are due. So I would just say deadline for the grant submission, which I see I misspelled. And anything that is a recurrent chore kind of thing, I just make a recurring appointment and it sits up there so that I don't have to put those on my to-do list if they can, if I don't want to. So let's talk about the master task list. So we've got our ideas for later. Now we're going to have a master task list. Remember, the task is that daily unit of work level thing. We're going to have a list that has all of the tasks that you have decided to do and are ready to plan when you're going to do them. I'll explain that more when we talk about projects. This is a never-ending list. You're just always adding things and taking things off. It's not a list that it's not intended to be a completed list. It's like a database of all the potential to-dos that you could choose from to do in a given period of time. And so it serves as, again, the repository of choices for time-specific lists. What do I want to get done this week? Here are the things on the list I'd like to get to. What am I going to do today? Here are the things on this list that I would like to get to. We'll talk about that when we talk about planning, how that works. Now, I want to say one more thing about tasks, and that is that how you describe your tasks matters, how you write them, what language you use. My favorite ill-written task is this one from one of my clients. His name is Ned. His name really is Ned, but I'm not going to tell you his last name, so you won't be able to, locate him. So I was doing a coaching session with Ned one day, and we were looking at his to-do list and task list, and there was this task called Florida Guy. And I said, "Oh, Ned, what is that Florida Guy task?" And he looked at me through the Zoom camera and looked up in the air. He was trying desperately to figure out what he had meant by that. And he finally thought of it. And so we changed the task to reflect the thing that he was actually going to do. Lots of us write these kind of code word tasks because you're in a hurry, you just jot it down and move on. And then you can't remember what it was you meant to do, or it's not clear enough for you to know how to do it. So I'm going to suggest a different formula for how to write a task. The first thing is to ask what you want to do. What are you trying to accomplish with this task? And here, Ned's what he wanted was to get questions answered about a talk that he had heard in Florida on the gut microbiome. That's what he wanted. And then you want to say how you're going to do it. So how am I going to do it? He needed to find the card, and he thought it was in his briefcase, and then he has to email him. So there you go. And so these would turn into two tasks. Look in my briefcase for the Florida speaker's card, email him my questions, read his microbiome talk. So he could end up with two tasks. And you might say, well, why in the world would you have two tasks here? Well, maybe you're in a big hurry today and You only have time to look for the card. You don't have time to email him. But you can also combine those into a sequence. Look at my briefcase for the card, then email him. When you have a task that's like that, when you come back to your list, you know exactly what to do, unless conditions have changed. There's no thinking, there's no remembering, there's no realizing you don't know how to do it or what you're going to do next. There's no, it almost eliminates procrastination on most tasks because you've laid it out there very clearly for yourself in advance at the time that you're most likely to be able to know that when you first think of the task. So I would highly recommend that you start writing out your tasks in more detail with the what you want and how you're going to do it with action verbs that are action verbs. So looking in and email is, I guess, a pseudo action verb, but we all know what we mean by that. We don't have to say write an email. So this can make a huge difference. Now, task tools, oh goodness, there's dozens and hundreds probably. And there is an actual answer to this question. What's the best task tool? It's the one you'll use. That's it. That's it. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about what you do. If you use all sticky notes, as long as they're all in one place, fine with me. Some people do that effectively or put them in a notebook or something so that they can reorganize them. You can do paper, you can do any kind of app, you can use documents like Excel or Word or Google Docs or note apps that are on your just plain text note apps that are on your phone or on the computer. So you have to think about where do you want to use it? What form factor appeals to you? For me, it was how bad is my handwriting? So I went digital really early on because I would never be able to read anything. So that's a question that we can't, everybody has to individually ask that. Don't pick a tool simply because everybody tells you it's the only one to use and then be miserable. Because if you don't like using it, you won't do it. Now, if you need to get started and you really have one of these widely distributed sets of tasks, my suggestion is that you just pull out a notebook or a legal pad and just start writing things down, one task per line. When you get to the end of the page, go to the next one, and then just start working from that. This is what I did 20 years ago because I didn't have a good system. And this just was like a miracle for me because everything was there. I could easily look and find the things I needed to do, cross them out when they're done. So that, and you could do the same thing in any kind of a digital any kind of app where you just list the tasks and don't worry about any of the fancy stuff, or in a Word document or in a Google document. So just start by making a list and getting it out there, and then you'll decide over time what other bells and whistles would be helpful to you. So now let's go on and talk about project work. And so this is an important one in academics. It's probably the most important one in some ways to get a handle on because most of the really important work that you do outside of the direct clinical service comes from the projects that you work on, especially if you're on the faculty. But even if not, those of you if there are residents here or who are listening to this someday, there are projects that you have as well. There are learning objectives, learning things you want to learn. There are exams to study for. And there are all kinds of personal projects that everybody has. You have to buy a house or rent a new apartment, plan a vacation, plan parties. There's a lot of project work in everybody's life, and keeping track of that separately can make a big difference in how likely you are to actually complete these projects. So the first coaching client case I'm going to tell you about is a woman who had been to one of my workshops before. This might sound discouraging to you that she didn't figure this out from the talk, but when I went to meet with her, she said she's overwhelmed, had so much to do. I went to her office, this was pre-pandemic, and she was here. And I said, well, let's look at your project list. So she looked at me and pulled open the desk drawer and took out that legal pad. That was it. She didn't have a project list. So we spent the hour making the list, and it just changed everything for her because now she could see all the things, these big things. She could decide what order they needed to be done in. She could pick the ones she was going to work on like this week or next versus the ones that could be put off. It just made she could generate tasks for each of them as she needed to. It really did change her work trajectory. So a master project list has some similarities to task lists in that you want to make sure that the project name that you've written clearly states what the outcome is you're aiming for. So you'll see here preparing for a board exam. has the date. I've always put due dates into the project name instead of trying to have some kind of special order of the projects. Just write it right in there. And the second one is planning a birthday party, and you don't have a date yet, so that's part of the planning process. So you just say you're going to come up with a date. As I said, this works for both home and personal and work projects. So then you'll have a whole bunch of those, or not so many, but however many there are. And now people sometimes say, oh, well, that's such an important project that I won't forget about it. But you do. You get so busy doing the smaller things that those big projects are out there looming, but you're not really focusing on them in a useful way. So by having a list to look at, you solve that problem. And then you can prioritize much more easily when you see a list than trying to think about the list. And also, if any of you are in a position where you're being asked to do new work, it will help you make decisions by looking at what your existing work is, whether or not, for things that you have a choice about whether you should take them on or not, because you'll see how much how full your plate really is or not, and that can help in that decision-making process. Now, the second client case is this was a remote client, so I'm just imagining what his desk looked like. He used sticky notes for his project list. So every project was on a sticky note arrayed around his computer, I assume on the wall. I didn't ever see it, but this is what I'm imagining. So that's fine. That would be a way to do it. No worries. They're consolidated and they're there where you can see them. But then, so if you look down at the computer keyboard on the left, there's a little flip notebook there, like a stenographer's notebook. That's where he kept kind of little tasks that he knew he needed to do during the week, during the workday, sometime in the near future. So he would come in the morning intent on working on a project. He'd look at the project names and he'd look at that little notebook with the nicely laid out, little detailed, easily completable tasks. And what do you suppose he did? Yes, he went right to the little tasks because he didn't have a plan for what he was going to do with each of those projects. And so he was trying his brain was saying, are we going to write the R01 or are we going to call John about lunch next week? Well, you're always going to pick John because you can do it, whereas the R01 cannot be done today. So you need to have a little bit more detail about projects to help you execute on the projects. So a project plan, this is a really simple project plan. And to be honest, I do this for any project that's new to me or that's of any size or has a lot of parts to it. And it only takes about 10 minutes. Honestly, you're just doing a quick back of the envelope list of what you need to do to complete this project. So here's the birthday party. Let's see, I have to pick a date. I have to check with my mother first about when will she be available. I have to figure out who to invite, get the contact information, where am I going to have it? I have to get the invites out, what kind of cake, or am I going to bake it? Probably not. Where should I order it from? Any other food, any decorations, or maybe other things. But you get the picture. You're just jotting down the things that you have to accomplish to do this project. And by doing that, you can now pretty easily put them in the right order because some of these things have to be done sooner rather than later. Like check the date is probably the first thing. And then you can order them and then you can modify this and add things whenever you like as you go along. And then you want to add some kind of a timeline. I usually do, I am pretty strict with myself about timelines. I only put a due date if there is an actual external due date. It's fixed. I use aim4 when it's either flexible because I'm doing it on my own time or it's negotiable. There's not any urgent deadline. And I'm clear about that because because you're always going to be overloaded. And when you have to make decisions about what to put off and what you want to know what the status of that project is. And then the final thing in any project is always what's the next task? What's the next task? And in fact, and so here's an academic one. You're going to take those boards. So you have to register, block the calendar, review the instructions, decide what you need to review, how you'll do it, plan a review schedule, add it to the calendar, maybe some other things. You might go to a course, need to take a course, whatever that is. And same kind of deal. And this would be a fixed due date. Both of them actually are fixed. So now some projects are so simple there's just a lot of tasks, but you can generate them pretty easily as you go. You don't have to write a plan if you don't want to, but you always have to have the next task. Every project that you're actively working on needs to have visible to you in your system what the next thing is you're going to do. And so the way I talk about what this means is if I worked on this project right now, exactly what I would do. Exactly what I would do. Oh, I'm going to work on a paper. I have to find the paper, open it, and go to the discussion and start editing. That's exactly what I would do. If you use that formula, you'll almost always come up with an actual task rather than some big chunk of work that you can't that is actually going to take more time, and it really is a kind of a sub project. So for the birthday party, call my mother to find out what dates work for her for the grandparents, and then find the email with the registration information, and then register, I suppose. So there you go. Okay, now the relationship between the project list and the master task list, then, just to summarize, is the project list is going to be something you can look at separately. And then ideally, you'll have a tool where you can keep the plans. It could be a notebook with one project per page, or a OneNote with one section per project, or a task app where there's a space where you can write plans in. It doesn't really matter as long as you can look at all the projects in one list. And then as soon as a task is ready to be done, you put it on your master task list. So here, this goes right on the task list. This one goes right on the task list, the two that we just talked about. And the task list also contains what I call standalone tasks. They're not part of projects. So it's just a list of all the tasks, regardless of whether they're project or not. So calling the dentist, emailing somebody about something, those all go on the list, because that master task list, that's the stuff you have to juggle in real time to get stuff done. Now we're going to talk about project execution and finding time for projects. But before we do that, there are some kinds of projects in particular, any kind of writing project or anything that's big, like a curriculum redesign or a course design. You can imagine in your own life what things you tend to put off. And underlying that putting off is often the believing the myth that you can't work on a project unless you have a big block of time. And it turns out that it's not true. Big blocks of time are great when you can get them and you can plan for them, but you're not going to have that most of the time. So you have to figure out a way to keep going on a project when you don't have big blocks of time. So that's what we're going to talk about. So what happens if you depend on the big block of time is this project execution scenario where you have a couple of days when you can do a lot, but then it all gets pushed into the end. Well, you all have done this before. I doubt if anybody here hasn't been in that last minute crunch. And it's not pleasant, it's stressful. The work gets done, but it might not be as good as it could be. And if there is no deadline, that project may never get finished because you just don't have a way of getting yourself to work other than depending on that final deadline. So the strategy is to figure out a way to regularly engage with the projects that you're currently working on. Maybe not every single day, but at least every week. And again, depending on what it is, maybe more often than that. And the tactic is to plan project tasks that can fit in various time frames so that you have something available no matter how little time you have in a given day. That's the plan. And so I think about these time frames, 15 minutes or less, which would be a task that you could do, 30 to 60 minutes, which is kind of a moderate amount of time. And you can work on most projects and get a fair amount done in that amount of time. And then sometimes you will want to plan to have larger blocks of time, 2 hours or more. But those almost always have to be planned. And so that leads to the idea of time blocking. And you can do this for 60 minutes. I mean, there's not a limit here on how big a time block needs to be, but anything that's going to be a lot of time, you're going to have to plan that well in advance. So a time block is just, you've used these probably at some time in your life for something. The idea is just that you plan in advance when you're going to do something and you put it on your calendar. And the underlying scientific sort of framework for that is that people who say what they want to do and also decide when they're going to do it are more likely to actually follow through. And so I find that even if I can't do the time block when it arrives, the fact that I have it on my calendar tells me that it signals my intention to do it, and I'm more likely to do it at another time. So time blocks are worth, it's a complicated, I have a whole article on my website on time blocking as an introduction if you want to take a look at that. One of the problems with time blocks, other than you may not have much time to put a time block on your calendar, is how are you going to use it well? A lot of people come up to that time block, and it won't surprise you to hear that they say, well, I have other things that are more important, so I'm not going to do this time block, because that work is almost always not urgent. It's important, but not urgent. And so, and then it's easy to get distracted and pulled away by others. So here's a little, what I call the internal kind of anatomy plan, or a little internal plan for managing a time block. The first thing is, and I probably say this about 100 times on this, have a plan before you start the time block. No, in advance, plan what you're going to do to start that block. What's the first little task you're going to do, the first move you're going to make. So for writing, I actually, my move is to open the document. I don't have to think about that. There's no stress in opening the document that I'm working on. And once I've done that, it gets my mind into that project. And there may be other simple things that you can do to get yourself started, but at least know what you want to try to accomplish. To stay focused, you're not always, obviously, you're not always going to be able to stay in the block the whole time, because you'll distract yourself, which you can try to minimize by saying, I need to keep going, but people are going to draw you out. So there's a strategy that I like very much, and it applies not just in time blocks, but anytime you get interrupted basically by yourself or somebody else. And that is when something pops up in your head to do that's not what you intended, or someone interrupts you with all the many ways they can do that, ask yourself, can this wait till this time is over, till I'm done with what I'm doing? In this case, can this wait till the time block is over? And if it can, negotiate with the other person when you'll call them back, and write down the thing, and then write it down. If you think of something you want to do, write it down, keep a list of those things so that you keep yourself focused in that work as often as possible. And then when you finish the block, whether it's early or on time or late, say, now what am I going to do with this project? What's the next thing with this project? And whether it's a task or the topic, the thing you'll do in the next time block. So you get this road, you have the basic idea is have a plan, try to do the work, and then plan the next thing, all within that block. Now we're going to talk about a method for weekly and daily planning. I think that for a lot of people that I work with, very rarely do people have an actual written plan for the week about what they'd like to get done. It's very unusual. More people will have some kind of a daily list, but even that sometimes isn't really written in a way that's as useful as it could be. So this is the one thing you could add that doesn't take that much time, that I think you'll find makes your work during the week more purposeful and helps you get important stuff done. So I'm just going to walk through exactly the steps that I use for a basic review. Now, the reason that you're doing this, remember, is that you have a lot of work and only a fixed amount of time in the week and in a day. So you can't do all this. So wouldn't it be better to have a way of in advance thinking about what would be the best things you could do at that time? And even if you don't do all of them or get diverted, you've at least you'll make better decisions when that time comes to have to you'll get more of these things done, and you'll make better decisions about priorities as new things come up during the week. So the weekly review is we're going to look at our inventory of work and choose what we want to do for the week, and update it, of course. It's best to do it before, and I'm going to assume that Monday is the start date for the work week, but whatever it is, you want to do it before the end of the week and the beginning of, and before the first day, so Friday to Sunday night. You can do a sort of a quick review in 30 minutes. Enough, in fact, if you could plan to devote 30 minutes to this to begin with, I think you would start to see the value, and then you take as much time as you need. It just depends. So the first step is to gather your inventory of work, which is your calendar for the week. And I'll say now you should also look 2 or 3 weeks in advance for big stuff that's coming up, but most of your focus will be on the coming week. And then you have your project list and your task list. That's it. Those are the 3 things. And then the second step 2 is to do the calendar review. I highly recommend doing this first because this provides so much value. Even if you don't do the rest of it, your week is going to be better. And this is pretty mechanical and simple to do, so it'll kind of ease you into the process. So you want to have a place where you can record any tasks that show up as a result of this review. And then this is it. You look at each thing that's scheduled, every single thing, you look at it and you say, is there any advance work I need to do for this thing? Then you go there, even if there never is anything, just look and say, oh yeah, there's a patient coming. I just remembered I better go look at their chart. I'm giving a lecture. I'm fine. Oh, a meeting. I have a meeting and I don't have the Zoom link or and I haven't looked at the agenda. So you make a list, you make a note. Get the Zoom link and review the agenda for the Wednesday meeting, and then finish out the week. That's it. That's all the calendar. Then anything that's on your calendar that you're not going to do, take it off. Wow, I worked with somebody who had like 15 hours of webinars on his calendar that he wasn't going to watch. Get rid of those, because it's a lot of cognitive clutter when you're looking at a full calendar, and most of it you're not actually going to do. Okay, that's that. Now, the third step is to look at your project list. And now, assuming you have projects, which 1, 2, or maybe 3 are you going to focus on this week? You can do little tasks for whatever projects you need to, but you want to try to make some progress. So focusing on 1 or 2 or maybe 3 in a week will allow you to make more progress. And just decide, what would I like to get done on this project this week? So that would be tasks, kind of the smaller tasks, and any blocks of time that you want to either schedule or just plan to use. And then if you want to add the time blocks to your calendar, if after using them you find that helpful, you can go ahead and just throw those on the calendar, as I've done here. So 2 projects, 2 hours each. That's that. And then the final thing is to look at the task list. So here, it sounds kind of tedious, but it's actually really easy. You just look at your list and just read each item. And if it's done, you get to cross it off. If it needs to be rewritten because it's confusing, rewrite it. If it's something you want to do this week, mark it in some way so that you have a list at the end of things you can choose from for the week. And if you may think a task you haven't not put on there. So just read each item, and it's very mechanical. All of this is actually pretty mechanical stuff, but there's thinking behind it that helps you, that's basically prioritizing. And then there's lots of things you can do about planning for a better day, but I'm just going to tell you about one of them because this is the one that has the most bang for the buck, and it's super simple. You're just going to make a little list of most important tasks for the following day. And if you fail to do it the night before, do it first thing in the morning. It might only take you 5 minutes. So I like this construct where I have the first set of things I identify are anything that has to be done today because there's a real deadline today. Either a real external deadline, or I promised somebody that I would do it and it's too late to renegotiate. I have to do it. Some days you may not have anything else on this list because this is intended to be a short list, typically no more than 5 items. And so if I had a couple of those, some days you'll have none of those, by the way. There'll be nothing that must be done today, but you'll have things that you would really like to do. And you want to kind of focus on high priority items here, and you're going to limit yourself to 3. And so the reason that this works is on a long list for the day, there will be a lot of little stuff and big stuff. But if you're like me, you'll go for the little stuff because then you get to cross things out. That's so great. But this list, it's embarrassing after you've written 2 important things task to write down refill the stapler, my stapler, as the 3rd item. No, it's embarrassing to put it on an AIM to-do list. So by nature, I just always have pick high priority tasks, which is not my inclination. And then because it's a short list, you're more likely to get them done. You're focusing on trying to get as many of these things done today as possible, along with whatever else. So you might have a second list of things if you have time to get to them. But this short focus list is one of the most sort of famous time management recommendations in the last 150 years. So it can't be wrong. So let's talk about email for the last few minutes. I found this picture years ago, and I just love it because this is again what a lot of us feel like in our brains when we're thinking about doing email. Okay, so I want to just say a little bit about the way in which email can be distracting. And you know how it is because your buzzer's going off and notifications are coming up and you're looking at your email all the time. And there's a lot of it and it's stressful because you don't have time to do it. And why are they writing to me again? And I don't want to see this stuff. So you know how that goes. So here are some strategies. One, turn off notifications. If you can get away with not having any notifications on your phone or your computer on bigger devices, just turn them off. If there's a business reason that you have to have the notifications on, okay, but if you don't, turn them off. And then stop looking at your messages so often. Checking is operationally defined by people who write about this as looking at the messages, the list of messages, maybe opening and reading a couple and closing them, but not doing anything. When you're done, you haven't done anything constructive. You've just looked. That is very stressful. And some people do it like some of you have done it like 3 times on this call. I understand. I still sometimes do it myself. But it really breaks your concentration if you're doing it like every 10 to 15 minutes, which a lot of people do. So if you're going to look at your email, do something purposeful. You've got some time, you're going to look and you're going to delete everything you can delete. You're going to look for just urgent messages that may have come in that you need to see, and that's all you're going to look at. But just don't do random checking. By definition, so the corollary is it's ideal if you can work on your email in batches. Now, they don't have to be big batches. You could say, I've got 15 minutes. I'm going to see how many emails I can take care of in that time. It could be an hour if you could stand it. Sometimes you'll have to do that to get caught up and so forth. But don't just do individual single emails unless they're urgent ones. It's ideal if when you're at home in particular, you could set some times when you're not going to look at your email at all. Having 24-hour exposure to email turns out to be, and there's a literature about this, is very stressful. So if you can stop looking at email for most of the evening and maybe have some specific time or two that you check it, that'd be ideal. And then no email access when you're doing work that requires focus. So writing, data analysis, developing a schedule, planning a new lecture. Don't have your email up in the screen. If we imagine for a minute that this is a 2-screen situation, the email is the left half of this screen on one screen, and the thing I'm working on is on the right, that list. So this is when people who have 2 screens often do. They have email up and also what they're working on. You can't help but look at that email list as you're working. So what you've got to do is get rid of it. Now, don't you just feel better having that list of email gone? Look, minimize it, exit from it, don't have it visible. Okay. Quickly, a storage idea. So the storage system is a complicated topic. You may have hundreds of multiple nested folders for email that you're going to keep forever. That's okay. We're not talking about that today. I want to talk about 2 particular kinds of folders that can be used to store messages related to work that you're currently doing, work in progress. Whether it's a conversation string that you're working with somebody on or a project. And so the first folder is I call waiting for. So I just abbreviated WF in my system, but you could write it out. The @ sign there is just a way of indicating these are these special folders. And in the old days, that's the only way you could get them to go to the top of the list. You don't have to do it that way anymore. But I find it still is kind of nice to know these are my special current work in progress folders. So waiting for means that I'm going to send an email to Sarah after this, asking her a question. I won't, Sarah, but I might. But I need to hear back from Sarah about what the answer is. So that message I sent to Sarah goes in my waiting for folder. It means I'm waiting for someone else to reply to me. It's a little subset of sent items. So that way I have one place to look to see if I've heard back from the people I'm waiting to hear back from. You can either just drag the email there from the sent items, or you can copy yourself or blind copy yourself and drag that second copy over into that folder. It's enormously helpful. Projects is a mainline folder. You can see that these are all at the same level as the inbox so that you don't get them lost. And here, every time I have a project that's going to have email associated with it, which is not every project, but it's quite a few, I make a subfolder for that project with the same name as the project on the name on my project list. They match. So they'll sort alphabetically, and then you can always find them. So here would be an example. I have a grand rounds talk to give. I'm writing a paper, board exam prep. I have to hire somebody for the clinic. I'm in charge. I'm on the committee to do that. So it's a little set of. So then once those are set up, when you get an email related to one of these, you do whatever the thing is, reply, whatever. And then that email gets saved now that you're done with it in that folder. So everything about the grand rounds talk is in one place. You don't have to go searching around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is just saves so much time searching around in sent items and your inbox and other folders. Just put them all in, and when you're done, move that out of there. You can do what you want with it, store it someplace else, delete it. I don't really care. But this just saves an enormous amount of time. Now, new messages, processing. This is really the thing you want to know about. And you had to wait till the end. It's very sad. But now we're going to try to explicate this process. The goals of processing new messages is to find, the primary one is to find every email that you need to act on. You don't want to miss important, real work. And then the other goal is to have a practice of putting the ones that you need to set aside to do later are always going to be in a consistent, unique place where the only things marked that way or there. This is very confusing until I show you an example, but people have this problem where they leave them in the inbox and do things with marking and make them unread and all that sort of thing. But you want to have a very clear way to know all of the emails you have to come back to finish. So we're going to talk about that. The biggest hint I have about doing email more effectively, even if you don't do any of the other things here, is to make a decision about what you need to do based on that for that email the very first time you read it. No more reading, groaning, closing, coming back a week later, reading it again, groaning louder, closing it, and so on. The first time you read it, make a decision about what you need to do. And so here are just some things. I mean, you may have your own list of things to add. You're going to delete it or you're going to archive it. And I want to explain this archive business here. So in Microsoft 365, which I'm hoping you all have, but you could make this folder if you don't already have it. There's an archive folder, and that folder is just a folder called archive. It's not taking your email someplace else. It's just a regular folder that you search like you do any other folder. And you can just throw them in there. If it's an email that you're saying, ooh, I don't know whether to save this or not, just put it in archive and don't do any more thinking about it. You should never waste time thinking about deleting, just put it in archive because you can always delete it later if you want. So that's the first thing. And then, file it if it needs to be filed and you don't need to do anything else in whatever file is appropriate, project or topical folder. I have an optional reading folder for things that are sent to me that newsletters, table of contents, professional newsletters, blogs I subscribe to. And if I can't do it right away, I just put it in there and get it out of my inbox. And then if I want to do some optional reading, they're all in one place. Sometimes it's better to talk if the email is asking a really complicated question and you're envisioning a 2-hour email composition session, you might be better off saying, maybe we should just talk about this and find out what your issues are and deal with the questions in real time. If you can delegate messages, do that. I have no one to delegate to, so I don't have that on my list. Um, so that leaves you with the messages where there's either a task for you to do or a new project where you have to reply. And most of it is you have to reply. And your choices are to do them now, get them into your system. If it's a project, obviously, make the project folder and so forth. Do the task or reply now, or you could defer it to later. And whether you defer it to later depends on how much time you have and how urgent the thing is. So the deferral, we'll talk about the options for deferral in a minute. Now, the thing that finally made my email kind of click for me, aside from making decisions immediately, was to have a process that I use every single time I do my email. So first, I do a pass of all the emails that have come in since I last looked, and I delete and archive anything that I can do that to without opening the message, just based on sender and subject. And then I look for urgent messages because I want to deal with those right away. Now, if I run out of time and I've gotten all the urgent stuff open looked at, I'm in good shape. But if I have more time, which I hope will, I do a second pass. And here I start at one end, either the oldest or the newest. And I open the message. I read as much as I need to decide what to do. And when I'm done with that, I've either done it or put it in my defer place. I open the very next message. I don't jump around and say, oh, what message should I do now? I do it like an assembly line. I can't even tell you how how much better it feels to do the assembly line method. You've already taken care of the urgent stuff, so that's done. Yes, you just do them in order, and it feels efficient. You can see the progress you're making. You feel like you're really doing work, and you're not stressing out about what message to look at next. Now, let's finish up quickly with the options for storing messages. Everybody has to do their own thing. Okay, the simplest, absolute simplest way to do it is to make a folder. Emails to come back to, or whatever you want to call it, and just put them in there. Then you just have to, have a system where you go in every day and do those and do something. That's the very simplest way to do it. It works in any version, any email system in the world that will work. The second one is to use a flag. Now, the problem with flags is if you keep your email sorted the normal way with just messages coming in chronologically by time, the flags eventually disappear off the screen. I worked with one guy who, when I said, how many flags do you have? We looked and he had 700. After telling me that flags were only on the most urgent, important emails because he forgot about them. They just disappeared. So the trick is to sort your inbox by flag. You see there's in this, we're looking at screenshots now, I should say, from the Windows Microsoft 365 desktop version. They all look slightly different. So the sort order is going to be here. And you'll see in the new version, which I hope you have, but if you don't, this still works. It will actually create two groups of emails, those that have a flag and those that don't. And these are collapsible and expandable. So you can close that up when you don't want to look at the ones that need follow-up and just work on the new ones, which are unflagged, or close the unflagged up and work here. And it's right in front of your nose, so you don't forget that these messages need to be taken care of. Now, Outlook is in the process of changing Outlook from the classic Outlook, which is everything we've had up until now, to the new Outlook. They're going to call it the new Outlook. And new Outlook, so the old, and they've changed the Windows, the Mac version has changed already in this regard, as has the web version. So the only system where you can sort by flag is in classic Outlook for Windows desktop. So if you're there, you can still use this. If the version that you have has pinning, where you poke the pin in the circle there, and the message pops up to the top, that's a way to do it. And now in the newest version, it also does the thing where it creates two groups, pinned and unpinned, so that you can have open and close these, which is much better. This is not available in Classic Outlook for Windows Desktop, but everything else. It works on your phone. It works on all the other versions. Now, the method that will work everywhere is to use categories. So category is that thing you use to make a color, put color on things. Like if you want red on your calendar, you go to the category up in the icon and make a red icon. You can make your own icons, any color you want with any name you want. And so I have one here called To Do. And I can attach that, there's a way to attach the tag. It's a tag base. It's like labeling in Google, in Gmail, to that email. And then if I sort by category, as you can see I've done over here, you now have one group of to-dos and one without. You can make more categories if you want. This will work in any version now and at least in the foreseeable future. So I kind of recommend that people think about using this method. And now, what should you do? Well, if there's something on here that would pique your interest about an area that you need to work on or you'd like to try, just pick one and try it. Don't try to do all of these things at once. That would be, that would be worse than doing nothing. So you can make a decision about how you want to handle that and just pick one. And you have resources. You're going to email me if you get in trouble and can't remember what I said or the slides aren't intelligible. You can find the article on my website. I'm providing 4 carefully selected books at the end of the slide set that will give you a bigger picture on some of these topics. Those are the topics that are on my website. There you have it. We did it. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'm like, as always, overwhelmed with now what is the first thing I need to put on my task having listened to your talk?
Yeah, so basically, what's your biggest problem in this of these things? What's bothering you the most? What do you think you could benefit from? And I would say if you don't have a consolidated task list, that would be the place to start.
Okay, that's a good one to do.
And a project list, those 2 things. And then
Yeah.
I would probably
Oh, yeah.
add a weekly review.
Yeah.
I would do it in that order if someone was completely uncertain.
So I know I've actually run out of time. Is there anybody has a burning question? Otherwise, I know people have to